Paul is willing. Look at that verse again. I rejoice, in fact, not just I'm willing. I rejoice in my sufferings for you. And I fill up in my flesh what's lacking in the afflictions, and I do it for the sake of the church or the sake of his body. I think Paul, first point, is willing to suffer as a participant of Christ for the good of the church in order to make the gospel known. So let's get this out of the way. Within the immediate context, Paul says, everything I'm taking into me, I'm doing it for the good of you. I'm doing it so that you will know him, so that you will see that someone cares for you, so that you will see that someone loves you. I don't know what's going on in the church at Colossae, but Paul believed that he could be some form of liaison to show them the seriousness of God's love as they watched him suffer on their behalf. To go, look, church, I'm doing this because I love you. I'm suffering this persecution because I love you. I'm suffering this pain because I love you. I'm suffering this problem because I love you. And we're on our way. Because I believe that when you walk out tonight, you can have a very clear, as clear as we can do, but a very clear idea of not only what Paul said, but what Paul meant and why it's vital for you. So we're on our way to that, okay? On the way there, there's a few things that I want to lay out as I think a principle for who we are in Christ and what this looks like. I want you to know that God has not chosen to bring salvation to the world through prosperity and success. God chose from the beginning of the gospel message to bring salvation to the world through suffering. How do you know? Go to the cross. When God brought salvation to the world, he could have done it at the tip of a sword. He had legions of angels waiting in the heavens to pull Christ off of the cross in the event that Christ wants the glory of God without the suffering. What's Calvary? I mean, it's the epitome of suffering. It is Christ the man. It's Jesus the man laying his life down for the very people who kill him. And the first words out of his mouth at Calvary, Father, forgive them. They know not what they do. That's our first hint that something weird's happening here. This guy isn't dying as a normal man dies. This guy is dying as a prototype of death. He's dying as to show us what real suffering looks like. And when the resurrection happens and the stone rolls away and the new man Christ comes out of the tomb, it shows us that God truly wins because God recreates man. He created man in a garden in Genesis, and he recreates a man in a garden in the Gospels. And the first Adam fails, but the last Adam succeeds. That's Paul's message of the new covenant, is to say that where the first Adam messed up, the last Adam, not the second Adam, the last Adam, because there's not going to be another one, the last Adam succeeds. And how did he do it? Totally without, this just doesn't even make any sense. He did it by dying. He did it by dying. You don't win by dying, and it flips the entire dynamic forever on how we think of society and how we think of power and how we think of God. If you don't think of God differently when you look at the cross, then I dare say the cross hasn't had its ultimate effect on you. Because once you see the cross, you realize that God's victory doesn't come because God smashes people or God destroys people, but because God allows himself to be smashed and allows himself to be destroyed. It's why in the book of Revelation, the lamb is as if it is freshly slain, because the lamb that wins in Revelation is still bleeding from the cross, because victory comes by suffering. So God didn't choose to spread the gospel through success and through prosperity. That doesn't mean God's anti-success or anti-prosperity. It means that the gospel message finds its strength in sacrifice and suffering. Listen, there's no way around that. I don't think we can follow a crucified Jesus if we don't see the source of the power of God's love at the point of crucifixion. It's Paul called it the display case of God's love. To the Romans, he said, God displays or manifests his love to us in that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. He displayed love by dying, and he displayed love by dying at the hands of someone else and dying innocent. He became guilty for all of us that were guilty. An innocent man dies, and from the place of his sacrifice, there comes the gospel. So God didn't choose to bring salvation through success. God didn't choose to bring salvation through prosperity. It's why the church struggles given enough success. Given enough prosperity and ease and comfort, the church almost always struggles in any environment across time and through all cultures. The church is at her weakest when she allies with the powers of the world, when she has the strength of governments, kings, and presidents behind her. The church is at her fattest, her slowest, her sloppiest, her laziest. But look throughout history at the places where the church, from the place of suffering, survived. And the revivals that changed portions of the world, in some cases small portions of the world or your immediate world, but then in many cases the world itself, from the point of suffering, from the place of pain,